Hello and welcome to Friends with Deficits. I'm your host, Adam Sultan. And my next friend is Miss Layla from Fume Fragrances. That's F-U-M, Fragrances. Miss Layla, or Layla Rushing as she is known formally, is an interdisciplinary artist and a self-taught perfumer. And that excites me to no end because I like perfume. You may have heard this before. I've even interviewed other perfumers and I'm always interested in their stories. This one gets a little bit geeky, I gotta say. I can almost not veer away from discussing perfume in it, even though she's got some other things that are going on, which are very interesting as well. You might get a little confounded or just confused about the stuff we're talking about, but for now, just let's see. Here's some brief things. Notes are just individual scents from like individual materials, like, I don't know, patchouli or orange or phenylacetic acid, and then add one or more notes to create something harmonious, hopefully, that's different than the sum of its parts, and that's called an accord. And if we talk about somebody's organ, we're not talking about a body part, but basically the supply of materials that a perfumer has. It's known as the perfumer's organ. And musk deers have fangs. I like gray flannel. And aromatic compounds contain double bonds, but don't behave like alkenes, and so they're classified as a separate functional group. But enough of my Wikipedia search. Here's Miss Layla.
Man, it's really cool to be on your show,
Thanks.
I love your sense of humor. I find you incredibly charismatic, and the things that you talk about and on your Instagram channel and stuff, really funny, culturally relevant. I love how sardonic and satirical you can be and how you improvise and you're really quick to think and respond, and the witty wordplay you do. I just really wanted to say thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, and that's like the best compliment I've gotten ever, so thank you.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate it. How did you get to LA? Or what brought you there?
Well, I was about 9 years old when I moved here, and my mom we were living in Parker, Arizona, and we were back and forth to Lake Havasu, which is where my Aunt Maddie lived at the time. My Aunt Maddie, my Uncle Kevin, and my cousins, and they were having a house party. My mom met, at the time, my soon-to-be sister's father. Years later, he became my sister's father, but we met him there at a house party. And this was in the 90s, so it was just like, when a man meets a woman, it's like, hey, baby, come to live with me. Like, dude, they met like that weekend, and I swear to God, we were like out in LA a couple weeks later. Yeah, I've been here off and on since then.
Do you like it?
LA?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, yes, I do. It's a bit crowded now, and I think since the pandemic, my thoughts about it have changed. I really kind of seek solace and solitude. I do want to get back to nature. So, the construction, all the noise. I actually live in a flight path, and just being with the airplanes and all just the constant city noise, I'm kind of over it. I'm ready to just be somewhere really remote. The pandemic really changed that for me. So,
Yep.
yeah, I don't know. Those are things I never really thought about. And then when everything got quiet, I started to really like it. And then when they turned life back on again, it was like, oh my God, it's so loud.
I know.
Anyway, how did we meet? Okay, take me back.
I'll tell you where we met. We met in line during Scent Week in LA 2 years ago.
That's right.
I forgot the place. It was in West LA.
It was some theater. It was for my friend Rachel's wine and perfume event. That was my favorite event of Scent Week.
Yeah, it was amazing.
It really was. It was really engaging. Her and this other perfumer, a natural perfumer based out of the Bay Area, I believe. Her name's Jackie Brenner.
Yep.
She was fantastic too, and just the two of them, it was like a powerhouse event. Plus, you get to drink for free.
I know. Alcohol, food, and perfume tasting, basically, her smelling.
Yeah, but it was good alcohol, good food, and good perfume tasting.
I know.
So
it was
just like, oh, yeah, I was in my happy place for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Wow. There was one pairing that I wish I could have helped with. I mean, I know nothing about perfume relatively, but we're serving a Barolo wine with something, and I don't know if it's Rachel's or not. But their perfume was kind of a rose quality, but
yeah. Was it tar and roses?
It might have been.
Okay.
But to me, if you've ever smelled stargazer lilies.
Oh, yes.
Do that and smell Barolo or taste Barolo. I swear it's the same thing.
I have this really vivid memory. I was 14. I was at my very first boyfriend's house, and they had this hallway in his home, and it had this kind of like little alcove where you could set like something small like a vase or whatever, a large vase, but it was just a small alcove. You couldn't put very much there, and it's not like a deep, setting into the wall or anything like that. But I remember walking into his house, and I've always been, fascinated with smells and stuff like that. But I walked into his house. I was like, what is that? What is that? And I couldn't, it was like a hound dog, just like
Hmm.
boom, went right to the smell. And I buried my face in these stargazer lilies. And I pull my face away from the bouquet, and he starts laughing at me. And I was like, what? And he's just like, your face is all stained red and yellow because the
Oh
stamens.
yeah.
Yeah, and I just like I couldn't get just had yellow streaks all over my face and red streaks all over my face, and I couldn't wash it off. And I was super embarrassed because like at the time, I had like acne and stuff like that. And he's just like, "Oh, it's on one of your pimples." And I was just like, "Oh no." And I was so embarrassed. I was like, "I really like this guy. Now I look stupid." 14. Now I look back and laugh, but at the time I was mortified. But that was like my first encounter with like stargazer lilies, and I have chased that smell. I actually finally created an accord that I'm really happy with, the stargazer lily accord, and I
Ooh.
made it smell like that.
Does it have
So
Barolo in it?
no, it doesn't, but now I'm like, I should ask Rachel to source me a good Barolo.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I might be wrong. It's been a while, but I just my brain at some point clicked either smelling the lily or tasting the Barolo and just going like, "Oh my God, there's something very similar with these two."
Yeah,
I
and
don't know.
and there's a thing for me too. I really like smoky scents. And if
Hmm.
you pair a smoky scent with a floral, I feel like it has this beautiful juxtaposition that just works.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
like that a lot.
And I think that's in like leather accords too often, where you have that smoke element, but then you have some kind of
Like
floral.
white flower, like a gardenia or a
Yeah.
tuberose,
Or
or
sometimes
yeah,
iris and stuff like that.
yeah, iris.
Yeah.
Iris is a tricky one because it gets powdery. I love iris PS.
Yeah.
It's like in my top 5 ingredients, materials to use in my perfume lab. But
Mm.
yeah, iris. It's just so powdery. And when you put it with the leather too, you're like, ooh, ooh.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like when I pair iris with leather, it can be like a femi leather, or a man who's comfortable wearing like a leather jacket with a pink shirt or a pink bow tie or
Right. Right.
scarf or something like that. Like, I don't know. To me, it's very pastel. Just the smell of that, the color of that smell is very pastel to me in a
Yeah.
good way.
Oh my God, I could talk about perfume forever. And you're a perfumer, and I'm interested in perfume and perfumers, and you. But you should take it away and tell me some of your story or whatever you'd like to tell.
It's always funny. I love to hear perfumers' stories like, how'd you get into this?
Right.
How'd you do it? So I didn't start out going, I want to do perfume, right? Like, I've always been into scents, into perfume. Like I've said, I love smelling things. I got in through the side door. I call it the side door of getting into perfume. I was a cook, more than just being a cook in Los Angeles as a single working female in Los Angeles. I took up
Yeah.
many, 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 many jobs on bartending, cooking. I worked as a production assistant, craft service. I've done freaking telemarketing. I was in the art world for a long time. I was a picture framer.
Over
I
how long a period of time?
I got into college about 2002, and I was technically still in high school, but I started college cuz high school just wasn't for me, and I found out that I could get college credits and graduate high school. So that's what I did. I came to LA again. I was living in San Diego at the time, but I came to LA again when I was 17 years old, and I got my first job at this picture frame shop in Studio City. And I worked there probably for about 13 years. But that was also like right when I finished college, it was the recession. So what I got my skill set in, I actually couldn't even find a job in my skill set. Nobody was hiring. So this was, turn it around to like 2008. So about 2008, the recession hit, and work was really, really slow at the frame shop. So I don't know. Art world was tanking, interior design. It just felt like everything was slow and they didn't want fresh, young people, fresh out of college. They'd rather take some seasoned, pro that's been in the industry for like 10, 15 years. But I just kind of, bopped around and did a whole bunch of stuff just to try and survive. I was, like I said, 17 on my own in Los Angeles, no help from my parents. At one point as a teenager, I was living in my car, just like going to multiple jobs. But yeah, I worked as soon as I turned 21, I started bartending, but I put myself through college selling weed, believe it or not,
Huh.
selling weed because I couldn't afford college. I went to community college.
Hmm.
So I sold weed and I worked at the frame shop, and then I worked as a production assistant, or I was cleaning houses, or just whatever I could, right? Absolutely whatever I could do to make it, right?
Hmm.
Make it on my own. I had a roommate at one time and I lived with various people, but I was pretty much on my own and doing it by myself. So yeah, in the period of a whole span of different years, that's what I was doing. And I ended up in perfumery because I had gotten fired from this restaurant that I was working at. I was one of the cooks there, and it was this kind of bougie tapas place in Altadena. I wasn't fast enough. Plus, I was the only woman in the kitchen. I think that was it, really. I was the only woman in the kitchen, and I was kind of used to working for chefs who were jerks.
Hmm.
They were jerks. They were really like pig-headed, and I don't know if it was just that whole misogynistic thing. Like things have really changed. This was quite a long time ago. I want to say like 2011, 2012.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I ended up taking a job at this manufacturing company uh, that made products, and the products were like essential treatment oils for the skin. It was like a bath company, so they did all types of soaps of varying thicknesses and purposes, body butters, lotions and potions and all kinds of stuff. And my job at this manufacturing facility was to add scent to these base products. And there were so many, many different types of fragrances at this place. So I got a stipend. I remember when I started working there, my boss at the time said, okay, you can have this much product and you can have, X amount of fragrance and stuff to take home. It's part of your work perks, right? So
Hmm.
one of the things I got to learn on the job there, because people would come in and they would want a custom scent. And we designed various perfumes, various fragrances that could go into like private label. I think that's what they called it, private labeling, and just customizing scents for other businesses. So I started to learn how to mix some of these fragrances, and that's how I got into perfume. And I remember the time I got the job, my boss asks me, "Well, why do you think you'd be a good fit here and why fragrance?" And I was like, "Well, look, taste and smell go hand in hand, and I know I can cook. And I think I can bring that skill set I have, the cooking skill set I have, use what I've learned about proportion in cooking. And I think I can apply that to fragrance." And I was so, so good at it. But
Cool.
what I was doing at that facility, it wasn't exactly perfumery because I was getting already made fragrances and mixing them, which is way easier than like making accords by yourself and
Right.
starting from the building blocks. As you know, I think I've seen you mentioned or referenced or pictured at the Institute for
Uh-huh.
Art and Olfactions Instagram account. So I know you've played around with just the basics,
Oh yeah. And I have a tiny little organ. I have a small organ. That, of 100 or so materials that I don't know what to do with. Yeah. It's learning minute by minute.
Yeah, piece by piece. So it's not like I told my boss at the time, hey, this isn't real perfume making. This isn't real perfumery. But I said something one day that offended her about perfume making. And I think it sent her on this journey. Sent her on this journey, and she was like, well, what does that even mean? I was like, it's not. And I remember thinking, because this is too easy. Like, everybody could be a perfumer if it was this easy. I remember thinking that. And I was mixing fragrances like white amber with violet and grapefruit and all this other stuff, right? And I remember just searching online and finding rose oil, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the rose oil we were buying from this vendor, it was $60 for 4 ounces of this rose oil.
Wow.
And I remember I had looked at the website Eden Botanicals, right? Eden Botanicals is one of my favorite vendors. I will plug them anytime, anywhere. But I remember going on to Eden Botanicals website, and I looked up a rose oil, and I think it was like a Bulgarian rose absolute or something. It was like $60 for 1 mil. And that's smaller than your pinky, right? Like, I took a turn. I was like, we're not getting real rose oil. That's what it was. I felt real proud of myself. I was like, we are not getting real rose oil. This is not real rose. We are cheating people. I think that's what it was. And I think that offended her. And I was just like, this isn't real. This isn't real. This is fake. Like, I just remember thinking, like, we're charging these prices and this is fake. But again, I had no concept at that time. Absolutely no concept. This is like circa 2013. Right. I had no concept of what an accord was. I had no concept. I just thought we were charging, a lot of money for these products that we were making. And now I look back at that, and that's not a lot of money. But at the time it was like, man, this is a lot of money. From there, I started saving the labels or the empty bottles that would come from these vendors. And this is how I got into making my own perfume. I would start calling these companies because, the labels always included the address and the telephone number of these manufacturing facilities for the fragrances that we bought. And I would go home on my own time, right? Not at work. And I would start calling these places up. And it started with something like Rose. And I was like, hi, my name's Layla Rushing. I'm calling because I have some questions about this rose oil. So, we buy this rose oil from your company, and like, how much rose does it actually contain? And then it was just, people would hang up on me, right? And I just didn't stop. Like, they were just like, oh, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that question. Like, normally I would just get somebody like that, right? So I would just keep calling and keep calling and keep calling. And I got a hold of somebody who made this coconut oil fragrance that we had. It was something that was really popular that we sold at work, especially, during the summer months or the warmer months. It was this creamy coconut. That's what it was called, creamy coconut. And again, I called this facility, and finally somebody talked to me, and they had said, oh, no, there's lots of different things that go into it, not just coconut. And I was like, okay, tell me more. And they're just like, well, it's proprietary. It's like a proprietary blend. And I'm like, I learned that word too, proprietary blend. That basically means it's a secret and we're not telling you. So there's this whole big thing that started to happen. I was like, this is really secretive. This is really weird. And so I went back and I reported to my boss, this is really secret. This is really weird. And nobody's telling us anything. And she mentioned something about the Institute for Art and Olfaction. And I thought, oh, this is a really big place. Like, it has the word institute in it. So it was big and scary. And I was in my early 20s, and I was like, yeah, that's too big and scary for me. I don't think I'm going to go there. I don't know if I want to talk to anybody because I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm going to look like an idiot. And I love the Institute. I love the Institute for Art and Olfaction because it doesn't matter where you begin. I love that place because they're so warm and they're so welcoming and they're so incredible. I'll get back to them, but
Yeah, it's the best.
back to
They're the
creamy
best.
coconut. She had said something. I had talked about the Institute for Art and Olfaction, and she went to one of their open sessions, but it started to do this thing where it caused some tension between my boss and I. And she went, she's like, it's not for me. It's not at all what we do. And I don't know what kind of a night it was there, but it was a long, long time ago. And I remember her coming back to work, the following day, or my following shift, I should say. And she just was disgruntled about it and didn't say very nice things about the place. And then that was it, right? I didn't hear much about the Institute for Art and Olfaction anymore. And I just kind of like put it off to the side. So I wasn't satisfied with any of that. And I kept calling around this freaking creamy coconut, this proprietary blend. I started Googling fragrance houses in the United States. And there's this one in New York, Delbia Doe. And they create they like compound, create, manufacture a lot of fragrances for indie beauty brands, various brands. But I called Delbia Doe, and I thought it was a company name. It's actually the name of Daryl Doe's mother. Delbia Doe is Daryl Doe's mother. So this man picks up, and he spent, I want to say, like an hour talking to me. And his name is Daryl Doe. And anybody who's listening goes, oh, Daryl Doe, and they're rolling their eyes. I don't give a crap what you think about Daryl Doe, listener. I was like, I like Daryl Doe. And I'm not here for the politics of perfumery. This guy really broke it all open for me. It was the first time that somebody who actually works with perfume and individual molecules sat down, took a phone call with some noob like me. And you can Google this guy. I'm like, he's on the board for the American Society of Perfumers. Mm-hmm. I don't know what a big wig this guy is. I have tried since to get a hold of him when I actually started making perfume. And I can't get a hold of this guy anymore. I've emailed him several times back and forth, and very busy guy. I don't hear from him. But I could tell you how lucky I was to talk to this guy. And he starts telling me about, oh yeah, individual molecules. That's this. And the whole time I've got a pen next to me. I've got a piece of paper, and I'm writing down freaking everything he's saying. And then he told me about a place called Perfumer's Apprentice, which is somebody who sells to little people like us, right?
Yep.
You want to experiment, and I'll plug Perfumer's Apprentice any day. So Eden Botanicals, Perfumer's Apprentice. Yeah. I love you guys. Shout out. So I started like buying aroma chemicals from them. But yeah, he had just taken, like Daryl had taken the time to sit down and tell me, nah, here's all the stuff in creamy coconut. Like, oh no, it's this. And I was like, so this proprietary blend everybody's talking about is like, he's like, oh yeah, accords. He goes, accords could be hundreds of molecules long. I was like, get the hell out. He's like, yeah. I was like, oh, so what's in rose? And he just starts going like, oh, geranyl acetate, phenylethyl alcohol, geraniol. Oh, you want to make it musky or you want to make it powdery? And I was blown away. He's like, what kind of rose do you want? Do you want a powdery rose? Do you want a musky rose? Do you want a red rose, a yellow rose? Do you want a pink rose? There's fruity roses. And he starts talking about like rose ketones and all these different things and ionones. And it just blew my mind. And I said, this sounds a lot like cooking. You know, I was like, I always relate perfumery to cooking. And I said, you know, when I'm dialing up the spice in a chili, you know, I could add any number of things that could give it heat. It's like that, both making a rose. And he goes, absolutely. I was hooked. I was absolutely hooked. And then again, I just didn't stop calling. So this was like 2013, 2014. And I'm slowly accumulating molecules in my apartment and then going to work and then trying to see if I can suss out these little, like, you know, molecules that I have. Like we had this fragrance at my work called Fresh Cut Grass. Mm-hmm. Fresh cut grass. The molecule for that is it's leaf alcohol, hexanyl cis-3 alcohol.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was just like, that's all it is. Oh my God. And then we had another one called Dirt. And I was like, it's Joseman. Oh my God. Like, I was just like freaking out. So anyway, I was trying to tell all this stuff to my boss. She had no interest in it. And I think it started to just kind of like, I don't know, intimidate her a little bit that I was getting really, really, really into it. So I left that job.
Hey there, it's still Adam Sultan. And I want to tell you about some great news and a surprise to me. Miss Layla has actually made a Friends with Deficits fragrance between the time of this interview and today, and she gave me a few samples of it to give away to some lucky listeners. It's very cool, and she describes the notes in it and the kind of inspiration, and then gives you a little chance to explore scent and what this episode might actually smell like. So I'm going to have a drawing by picking some lucky Patreons, people who help support the show with generous contributions of as little as $1 a month. If you sign up and subscribe at patreon.com/friendswithdeficits, you'll be entered into the drawing. And if you sign up for a $10 or more contribution, I'm just going to give you one of these. First come, first serve. Literally, I can hold almost all of them in my hand, so there's not a bunch of them, but they're very cool, and I was really excited and grateful that Layla put this together so quickly, actually, as well. So check out patreon.com/friendswithdeficits, and you'll enter the drawing to win a Friends with Deficits fragrance. Or if you sign up for $10 or more, you'll just get a Friends with Deficits fragrance. And if I run out, I'll try to ask Layla to make some more. We'll see. And now back to the show. I was curious about your synesthesia.
Oh,
Can you talk about that?
yeah. I didn't really know that I had that. I was dating somebody, 2014, kind of these woo-woo shaman yogi types.
Are you one of those?
No. This was somebody I met through work.
Okay.
Did not expect that relationship whatsoever. But I was cooking naturally. I was cooking for him in my kitchen, and I had him over at my apartment, and I was just explaining something, and I was like, it's too jagged, right? I have to take this down. It's too jagged. It's very sparkly. It's bright. It has really pointy edges. And he's going, again, I'm well into my 20s at this point, and he had said, you can taste shapes, and I was like, well, can't you? And he's just like, no. And it was one of those things. He tried to explain it to me, and that's like somebody trying to say something that's so inherently part of you. I didn't understand. I didn't understand that anybody else didn't smell or taste this way.
What were you describing?
Chicken, I think. And there was just something I was looking for on the crust of the chicken that I was trying to achieve.
Okay.
I was trying to crisp the skin a certain way, and I was using a certain breading, and I think I had zested some citrus into the breading when I had put the dry crumbs on there. And it didn't have enough something, and it was too zippy. So I think I had maybe gotten too much pepper on it, or I had gotten too much citrus or too much tang, and it just had too many edges.
But are you describing being able to taste it based on what the texture looks like, or you tasted it and it had a shape to it?
I tasted it and it had a shape to it.
Okay.
So I was explaining all these things to him about the crust and just I was like, don't you taste that? Don't you taste that? And he's just like, no, I don't taste it. He's like, it's lemony, it's tangy, but it doesn't have shapes. And I'm just like, what? It didn't make any sense to me. And I thought, like, what? And so that was the very first time anybody had said anything like that to me. I was just like, I think you have synesthesia. And that sounded bad. I was like, what is that? And he laughed and he said, that's nothing to be ashamed of. And that's nothing. And I was like, ashamed of. And I was just like, so I thought it was something bad. I thought, like, I have a disease on my tongue. I didn't know what that meant. I quickly found out that's how I had synesthesia, and it never even dawned on me. It just never even dawned on me that anybody else didn't taste this way or smell this way, or it kind of happens when I smell too. So,
I was going to ask you about that.
yeah. I didn't really put the two and two together because somebody had asked me that before, and when they said, okay, so you can taste shapes, can you smell them too? And I was like, and again, like, it's something that's so inherent, I don't really think about it. It's like if somebody were to ask you to change how your voice is, like, you're like, what do you mean change my voice? Like, you don't think about your voice, you just have your voice. Yeah. Right. So I don't know if that's a good comparison or not, but it was just one of those things.
Yeah. They do. I mean, there is a relationship between touch and olfaction, or being able to perceive kind of textures, I guess. Is that more uh, fine tuned with you, or do you experience scent in a kind of tactile way?
I mean, I can say that I experience it in a tactile way. I don't know how everybody else smells, and I
Hmm.
don't, know how everybody else interprets it. So I can't say that I'm special in that way.
Yeah.
I I've read, right, because I started reading up on synesthesia. I've read that everybody is born with
Hmm.
it. Babies are very sensitive. It's when we start learning and perceiving the world for the first time that all of the senses they're all one until we can start separating them, right? Like, oh, there's
Right.
sound. Okay, that's taste. Okay, that's touch. So all of that, I can hear this, but as babies, we kind of take it in all at once. So I don't know if those wires got crossed and then laced and got, braided together in one direction,
Hmm.
in my brain or what. But yeah, I kind of read that we're all born that way. It's whether or not we choose to fine tune those things or the life experiences we have can enrich certain aspects of our brain and how we interpret the world.
Definitely. Yeah.
I'm definitely obsessed with smelling things. I can say that I'm more attuned to it, very sensitive. So I can pick up. That's another reason I want to leave the city is all
Hmm.
the smells. There's a
Yeah.
lot of smells. And I mean the smells like exhaust, or I can smell sewer lines. Yeah, I've become very, very sensitive. I can smell airplanes now, like even if they're high above in the sky.
Wow.
I know it sounds nuts, and somebody listening to this may be like, bullshit.
Hmm.
But like, I can smell all of this stuff around trash trucks, like it's trash day.
Hmm.
And my trash can is probably a good 150 feet away from me, but I can always tell it's trash day in my neighborhood, you know?
Hmm.
Little things like that. I can smell trash. I can smell human urine. I live in a city, so it's like urine is everywhere, the smell of urine. I read this quote by a perfumer, and the
Hmm.
quote said, "There are no good smells. There are no bad smells. There's just smells." And that was a quote by a perfumer, and I was like, "No, no, there's definitely bad smells."
You are wrong, sir. Is that Jean Claude Elena?
You know
Who
what?
said-
I don't remember who it was, which is why I said a perfumer, but now I'm going to look it up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just remember this. There's no good smells, there's no bad smells, there's just only smells. And it was just kind of like speaking to all perfumers. Like, if you're a real perfumer, you won't
Right.
you won't designate whether a smell is good or bad. Like, I'm just
Yeah.
like baloney. Like,
I'm finding that though, like the more I learn about perfumery, like I'll be like, I really like these scents, but I hate these kind of things. And then you learn about them and you're like, I love these things. Like we were talking
yeah.
earlier about powdery scents. Like I couldn't
Mhm.
stand like all the iris kind of violet notes. I'm like, ugh, like I wouldn't wear it. I'm not interested. Now I'm fascinated.
Yeah. Oh, I know exactly what you mean. There are some chemicals I was not into. I'm still not into them, but there is a certain fascination with smelling them, namely the
Totally.
molecules that I'm going to call them movie stars. Okay. You know
Hmm.
how you see the same celebrities in like, oh, so many movies? It's like that with fragrances. And these movie stars come out like norlimbranol, ambroxanide, Isoe, Sylvamber, I could keep Broxen, I could keep going.
I know like one of those.
Yeah, and there's something trending right now. I swear to
Okay.
God, it's in every major new fragrance. It's called Akigala wood. But to be honest, it's a captive molecule I haven't even
Right.
smelled yet.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the kind of fragrance sleuth I am. I am like constantly on the ass of these major, we call them the big boys of perfumery, all these fragrance houses that develop these new molecules. And these are chemists,
Hmm.
okay? Like, these are very different from perfumers. There are perfumers with chemistry backgrounds, and then there are the chemists coming up with these molecules. And the chemist goes, it's very, very akin to like a painter who makes paint, right? I'm creating this new color for you. Here, use it
Yeah.
in your palette. It's like that. So the chemist creates the molecule and says, here, perfumer, turn this into something, put it in a
Right.
fragrance. And it's the same thing of how paint goes on a canvas, right? You can have a color of paint like titanium white, but what can you do with that titanium white? And that's the same thing that happens with these molecules in Akigala wood, which I have not. Hopefully, I'm even saying that right. I have dyslexia too, so it's just like, did I
Oh
read that
shit.
right? Um, So Akigala wood, I really want to smell that, but it's trending in so many different fragrances.
Wow.
And now the best I can do is to go to fragrance boutiques that have the scents that have Akigala wood in it to try and smell it and suss it out to see what it smells like. But I have to be honest, it's a woody amber molecule.
Hmm.
And a lot of these woody amber molecules smell similar to me.
Yeah.
And they're trending in everything now. So everything, and they're huge, huge. They just have massive projection and massive performance. And oh my God, they choke you. They choke you.
How big is how many materials do you have in your perfumer's organ?
I don't know. That is that's a lot.
Have you memorized them all? Are you pretty familiar with them?
I haven't memorized them all, no, only because I continually source. So if there's something I haven't heard of, I do source it. And if it becomes available for me, I will source it. I do have favorites. I do have a lot that I do use repeatedly because I love them, whether they're natural or otherwise.
Mm.
But I read about exercises that perfumers go through where they smell things blind. So, as an exercise for myself, I tried to do this every day for at least 10 minutes. I used to try and do it for a half an hour, but then it just got so overwhelming the more sensitive I became
Mhm.
to some of these molecules. But I'll pick something off of my organ and I'll open it up and I'll smell it. And again, these things are already diluted. So a lot of these, if I'm picking them up at random, and I'm smelling something crazy strong, like I'm not, doing that to myself anymore. But I'll pick things up and I'll smell them and I won't look at what it is. And I'll see if I can remember what it is every time. That's how I smell perfume in the world now. Is I go, oh man, that is overloaded with this or that, right? And it's like that's all I can smell. That a good perfume not only smells good to me, it has to confuse me. I have to go, what is in this? What is this combination? Because if I can pick out like, oh, there's terrasol. They used a lot of terrasol in this. Ugh, I don't know. It's not fun for me. I'm just like, yeah, that's this, I'm just like, and that's not to slam anybody who does that. It's just as a perfumer, like I really want something that's unique. I want it to puzzle me.
Yeah. Do you care
Do I care?
about, yeah, like being late to the game? Are you concerned with what the trends are as far as being a perfumer? Or another way to put it is, are you making perfumes out of your own desire to create fragrances you like, or as an art form, or are you like really thinking, well, like, how am I going to sell this?
Both. I think about both of those things. I want to be original. So a lot of the time I will try and do the opposite of what's trending.
Hmm.
But if somebody comes to me and wants a custom fragrance and they say, I like this or I like that, and I know that's one of the trending molecules or I know that's one of the trending styles, I will have those, molecules in my studio on my organs so I can play around with those.
Yeah.
Definitely. Definitely.
Um, you mentioned, not in this conversation, but in another one we had of some other issues that have arisen as from being a perfumer.
Oh, is this where we get to the deficits part?
Boom. Yeah. I didn't know how to
So
put it lightly, but the name of this podcast.
the name of this podcast is Friends with Deficits. Um, I have become extremely sensitive to scent in a negative way. So when I first got into this industry, when somebody would walk into the place I was working, sometimes somebody would walk in and they go, "Oh God." And they would just fan their face and fan their nose and fan their eyes and say, "I got to get out of here." And they would exit. They would exit the store. And I was like, wow, that was dramatic. Right. And then, like, I just looked at chemical sensitivities as like, you were less than, you were like weak, like something's wrong with your system. So the deficits part of what has been happening in my practice and as a perfumer, and I've been struggling with this for years now, I have developed chemical sensitivities. And being totally truthful and totally honest here, as a self-trained perfumer, I didn't know what the hell I was doing for a long time. And I'm wondering if part of that ignorance created the chemical sensitivities that I have. I would just take the cap off of something and oh, yum, a new molecule, it's here. Oh, I wanted to smell this. And I get really excited. Just take the damn cap off. No gloves, no frickin' goggles, no barrier between me and this scent. I didn't dilute it first. And I would just smell these things. And I operated that way for years. Oh my God, Adam, like, sure, you can do that because I did. I still can. But I think that really took a toll on me. And I started having these anaphylactic type responses. Couldn't breathe. I felt like I was gonna die. First, it started in my studio. I started to feel really sick. I started to feel really woozy. I would open up something, I'd smell it. I was like, "Oh, I can't do this." Namely like C12 or C12 lauric, like C12 MNA, like aldehydes, really, really, really powerful ones. The chemistry aspect of these molecules is they're so teeny tiny. That's why they're really volatile. Like you lose them first because the molecules are so small. Any small molecule kind of started it, and I would just start having these attacks. I started getting like these rashes. My face would kind of swell. I started having allergies, like almost like seasonal allergies. I was like, what's going on? So I started going to the doctor. They're like, oh yeah, you have seasonal allergies. I got allergy tested for any number of things. It flared up again. I want to say 3 months ago, it flared up again. And again, by this time I've already started diluting. I'm trying my best to like follow safety protocols. That's why, by the way, as a self-trained perfumer, I started getting into the safety aspect of things and the regulatory compliance of things and why we use certain materials in a fragrance at a certain level. I started reading documents from RIFM, which is the Research Institute for Fragrance Materials, and IFRA, which is the International Fragrance Association. There's a lot of politics, and I'm not here to get into the politics. I'm not sure, listeners that we have here, if they are perfumers or not.
I'm going to have a glossary,
A glossary. um, they're here to try and put measures in place to keep cosmetics and fragrances, safe for everybody to use. Like what we put on our skin is a big deal, right? Like our skin is our largest organ in our body. Nobody thinks about that, but it is. So what we put on our skin matters. And what we are directly smelling, in my case, in my studio, started to matter. And again, I didn't really pay attention to lab safety when I first got started. I was doing crap all willy-nilly. And I got to be honest, I didn't have the best teacher either. Like when I first started at that body care manufacturing company, we didn't wear gloves, we didn't wear goggles, we didn't do any of that. We put on an apron and we got to work. That was wrong. That was wrong. That was not GMP compliance. We didn't wear hairnets. We didn't wear lab coats. We didn't wear gloves. I look back at how I first started, and because these are the practices that I adopted, I just kind of kept that going. And I took one class at the Institute for Art and Olfaction, and the teacher at the time was Chris Russek, and he's an independent perfumer. I'm not sure where he went to. He had his own practice for a while, but he had a lab safety class. And again, this was like the only class I've ever taken as a perfumer before. And so he started talking about, all this lab safety stuff. A lot of it I was doing already. But I started to learn about how to antioxidize and preserve materials and stuff like that too. And I don't know, just everything really, really changed. I started to take this stuff very seriously. He and I started talking about IFRA, and I started realizing the importance of all of these things. And I started getting IFRA documentation on everything that I made and looking at things, knowing the usage levels, memorizing the usage levels of some things. And again, these things change all the time. These documents are published all the freaking time and republished and re-gone over with a comb. And, so it's something you got to stay up on. Staying, common with or up to date with all of that stuff is important too. So anyway, The allergies thing has become a problem, a big time problem. It's prevented me from doing my work. And I had COVID at the beginning of 2022. And I don't know if the level of inflammation in my body from getting COVID, because I was really sick. I lost my sense of smell. And as a perfumer, that was big and scary. And I didn't know if I'd ever get it back. But I did. I got my sense of smell back, but the inflammation in my body didn't go down. So I've had this kind of chronic inflammation that's been happening since COVID. So that could have a lot to do with why I'm still so very sensitive to some of these molecules in my studio. But it's gotten to the point where it's like I'm in bed, I have terrible migraines. I can't even, chemical sensitivities are real. And I kind of used to shit on that whole idea, like, you know, people just being that sensitive to something, that sensitive to fragrance. And I work in fragrance and I'm that sensitive to it. So I know exactly what these people are talking about. I can barely walk down the aisle in Target where you go to get your laundry detergent and, or the cleaning supplies aisle. I can't even walk down that at the grocery store. It's too gnarly.
Do you think you're as sensitive to the chemicals around you in stores and whatnot as you are to your own materials that you're working with?
Oh yeah, it's everything. It's not even just the materials I'm working with or the smells in the stores. It's like if a city bus goes by and I'm standing on the corner and it's like the exhaust is too much, like I'll be sent into a migraine, I'll feel sick. I could sometimes break out in hives, just coughing attacks, not being able to stop coughing, feeling like I can't breathe. I've gotten inhalers for this stuff when just have these kind of allergic episodes. And as a perfumer, I can't even think about, what could be worse other than losing your sense of smell entirely, to just have this extreme sensitivity on the other spectrum. So it's like after I got COVID, instead of losing my sense of smell, I went to this other extreme, like everything smells. Everything smells. I can smell computer screens. Like right in front of me, I can smell a computer screen just because the electronic components right in front of it. It's just
Oh
nuts.
my gosh. There are people with hyper, sensitivity in that way, but for it to
Mhm.
suddenly dawn on you,
Yeah, and I don't
crazy.
know if that's because of the way I misused all of these molecules and fragrances when I first started. It makes me wonder about that if it was just this kind of constant conditioning of touching these things and doing these things a certain way, or if COVID compounded that or started that. Like it's really a mystery to me.
Had you experienced any of this before you got COVID?
I had experienced a little bit before, but this was like super powerful molecules. Like I've broken stuff in my lab before, or I can tell when I go to visit the institute if something got broken in there, be like, oh, that's one molecule, 2-acetyltyrosine or something like that, because it just smells like buttery popcorn everywhere, all over the floor.
Mm-hmm.
Um, sensitive to things, I would say even more so after COVID. And when I went to see my primary care physician, I think with explaining all of this stuff to her, she said, probably since COVID, it's this chronic inflammation. The body just has chronic inflammation. And I'm like, you should see my diet. I mean, it's immaculate. I keep really, really low inflammation diet. I eat a lot of seeds and nuts and fish and it's just berries. I drink a lot of fluids, a lot of water. I limit my caffeine. I limit my alcohol, like all that fun stuff, anything that could cause inflammation.
How do you think inflammation relates to being oversensitive to smell?
I'm not a doctor, but I can imagine it affects everything. I mean, inflammation can affect your joints. It can affect your stress levels. I mean, it's kind of like how your microbiome in your gut is important to your health.
Yeah.
Inflammation, if you've got chronic inflammation in your body, I imagine it can affect all kinds of things, brain function. Yeah.
And maybe we could talk a little bit about your dyslexia that you mentioned.
Oh, wow.
Is,
Um,
is that a lot? Should
Gosh.
we stick to work?
No, that's fine because it affects my work too. It's so funny because a lot of my work is done in Google spreadsheets and just how everything is on all these little tight lines and there's lots of numbers and quite a bit of arithmetic involved with perfumery and numbers is where I struggle and if things are grouped too close together. So I was in second grade. This is in the 90s, so it's not like I got a proper diagnosis, but I was sent home with a letter that I was to bring back to my parents to say, this child is struggling with reading. And it really started with reading. There's all these different modalities we have, right? When we start to learn how to perceive the world. I'm very much a kinesthetic learner. I love to touch things. I have to touch and explore things with my hands. It's really funny. My mom would say stuff like, Layla, do you have to touch everything? She'd say it just like that. I was like, oh, and I always felt bad because I had to touch everything to understand it. And that's I became a painter. Like painting was my first love, and like graphite and pencils and pastels and all the stuff I could touch and smear with my hands. And I worked with wood for a long time, like I mentioned, being a picture framer. But getting back to the dyslexia, I struggled in school. That's getting back to remember how I said I started college early.
Mm-hmm.
I hated school. I was never, ever, ever good at it. And I was surrounded by really, really smart siblings. And I'm not by any means unintelligent or stupid, but the dyslexia, it prevented me from having from mirroring the grades that my sisters had. My younger sister, Annie, we're born 11 months apart. We're kind of Irish twins. She was smart, really smart. So she was put in classes ahead of her grade, right? So she was in my classes. So I always felt like, damn it, like, oh, I actually would cheat off of her math tests and all her math homework because I couldn't do math. I struggled. And so taking that into my working life, and just in school in general, like I had to work way, 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 way harder than my sisters did. Like things just came really naturally to them, straight A report cards. I felt like they didn't have to study as much. If I had to, like English, interestingly, when I had to read books, it was one of my favorite classes besides art class, but it would take me so much longer to read books. Like I'd show up to class and I had this girlfriend in my English class named Sonia. And she's just like, oh yeah, I finished it in like 2 hours. I was like, you finished that book in 2 hours? Like I have trouble with reading comprehension because sometimes I have to read things 1, 2, and 3 times. Like what works for me is repetition, 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 which is, how I got really, really good at certain things in my life is just doing the same things over and over and over and over again and kind of perfecting them. So that's really where I excel is if I can do something again and again and again. But if I'm reading something or saying something or pronouncing something wrong, it's hilarious because when we're talking about perfumery, people go, oh yeah, beta caryophyllene. And I was like, I thought it was beta caryophyllene. And I'm just like, the way we all pronounce these different chemicals. And I'm like, wait, how did you pronounce that? Somebody said vanillin. When you're working with vanillin, it's kind of sweet and nutty. And I was like, vanillin? I was like, I don't think I have vanillin. She's like, you've never heard of vanillin? And I'm thinking to myself, I'm trying to spell it in my head. And then I'm like, so I was like, vanillin? Are you trying to say like vanillin? Like vanilla? Vanillin? Anyway,
I still want to call it vanillin. Yeah.
it's vanillin, right?
I don't know. Now,
Oh,
who knows? Yeah.
that's what I mean.
Yeah.
So we could go on and on about how we can pronounce things and chemical names and perfumery. Yeah, just the dyslexia stuff. Oh, I suck. I suck at math. I suck at math. I actually have to have my formulas checked by my partner Kenny, because I could mistype something. I could add something wrong, even though there's add functions in Google Sheets. Like if I'm doing something, I've got this huge spreadsheet full of calculations and, full of different amounts in the formula. Like I still can mistype something. I get sixes and nines confused. Various letters, if they're uppercase, lowercase, like they can kind of confuse me and they get really jumbled. So, basic kind of stuff like that. But yeah, it can be a hindrance sometimes. And I know I'm not stupid, but I feel stupid sometimes. I'm just like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that.
Do you know the causes of dyslexia?
I don't. No, I didn't. And I actually used to have a little bit of a stutter as well.
Huh.
So, because my brain can think much faster, than my mouth can move. And, sometimes when I talk out loud, I get really nervous.
Interesting.
But Yeah, I used to have a stutter too that would go with it.
Did you just get over that naturally, or did you have some help?
Practice.
Practice.
Practice and slowing down, speaking with intention, again, reading with intention. And also I learned reading the stuff that's interesting to me because a lot of the time I'm not comprehending a lot of what doesn't interest me.
I was going to ask about that. Do you listen more than you read, like to
I
audiobooks?
absolutely do. I
Yeah.
absolutely do. Like people just say something in passing and I'll remember it and I'll bring it up in a conversation. They're just like, how did you know that? Like you said it, you said it to me. I did, like one of those things like,
Hmm.
yeah, look. Or I'll just hear somebody in the next room. Like my hearing's very sensitive too. We have different, areas of the brain that will sharpen and compensate in these amazing ways. And my brain has done that definitely.
Do you think there's any relation to dyslexia and smelling, or even becoming interested in scent?
That would be an interesting research study. Or is there a correlation between synesthesia and dyslexia?
Yeah.
I don't know. There's this sense in me. I have a lot of pride in becoming an independent perfumer, and I'm fascinated in how the pros are trained. And I didn't come from any sort of privilege. We grew up really, really, really poor, which is why I couldn't afford to go to college, which is why I put myself through college to get the trade. I actually got a certificate in a certain trade that I never ever got a job in because during the recession, everything, I'm not the only one. There's people of my generation who just went to school for something and then never got a job in it because nobody was hiring when we all got out of school. Actually, I'm 37 years old, so
Hmm.
so for perspective here, people in my age group were actually considered the indentured class because we were still
Wow.
paying off student loans. This is what we went to school for. I thankfully don't have a student loan, but like my brother-in-law, same age as me, my sister, they're still paying off their student loans and they don't have jobs in the field that they went to school for. I would have loved to, have my newfound interest in perfumery and then go to study it in Gras. I didn't have that privilege, like at all. And so I'm really proud of myself for teaching myself the same, what I think is the same stuff that these perfumers are learning, and kind of patting myself on the back for doing it the right way and doing it the legitimate way. And now, like, when I'm in my lab, I wear my mask and my lab coat and my gloves and my protective eyewear and my hairnet. Like,
At least you look the part, if nothing else.
yeah, I mean, I really am like a little lab rat now. And gosh, all those things mean something. They all mean something. And it just feels like a little badge of honor that I wear. Like I want to be taken seriously as an independent perfumer because I do it right. I'm not some Susie homemaker just making products out of, you know,
Creamy coconut. Yeah.
yeah. God bless creamy coconut. We love it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I know. I look back at that and I go, hey, I got my start. And that's what it was. That place was a start for me. And I'm not here to like crap on that place or anything like that. But I can look back and go, ooh, we were not doing things the right way. But
Right.
how was I to know? Like, you don't
Yeah.
know what you don't know, right?
Yeah. Did, did you say you don't really wear perfume?
I actually don't. No, I'm so inundated by smell half the time. I've got fragrance free lotion in my house. I have fragrance free shampoo.
Well, most perfumers I know or have heard of, it seems like they all have had some big interest in great perfumes, and they have a history with the classics, and know a lot about different perfumes because they've smelled them or worn them or something. So what was your interest in perfume, or has it always just been creating it and learning about the aroma chemicals?
Man, I can remember you had mentioned somebody like having an interest in perfume, from an early age, like, and then kind of knowing the makers. And I did
Yeah.
not know. Remember how I said I grew up poor?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
when people were to say like Chanel, or somebody said Guerlain to me, and I was
Hmm.
way, way already into like making fragrance already. I had never heard of Guerlain
Wow.
ever. And they're just like, you've never heard of Guerlain? Like, I felt like this black sheep of like, what the fuck are you doing here? Like, you are not one of us.
It's
like,
like I'm making blue jeans. Like Levi's? What are Levi's? Yeah.
oh God. And that's how I felt. Like, I just felt like, oh man, there's a deficit. There's one right there.
Yeah.
I felt like I was like, had no education. I didn't know enough to be there. Like, I felt like a total misfit in the cool crowd again and again and again. And again, I landed in this body care manufacturing place just by accident. I just needed to pick up a job. But the things I was into as far as smells were in nature. Like when I lived in Montana, my birthday is in May, and May to me is the smell of lilacs.
Hmm.
And I have early memories of just knowing that it was close to my birthday because the lilacs were in bloom. Or when I lived in California, I associated the smell of California with the smell of orange blossoms. And when I lived in Arizona, I associated it with the smell of really distinct things. Like we had inner tubes that we floated the river in. So it smelled like the river, it smelled like rubber, and it smelled like sunscreen.
Yeah.
So like there's these very significant moments in childhood where like smell started to become associations of places or people, right? That's what I was into, or different smells like that. I love the smell of herbs. Like we had a garden when we were in Montana, and we grew tomatoes and we grew rosemary and pumpkins and cucumbers and raspberries and plums. And but the smell of plum blossoms, the smell of the rhubarb.
Mm.
When I would pick the rhubarb and I would get the rhubarb on my hands and I would smell rhubarb or strawberries, tomatoes. Like I love the smell of tomatoes. So I really love the smell of herbs. We would have an herb garden with like oregano and mint and all this other stuff. So yeah, those are the types of smells that I was really fascinated with. And I would rub them on my body. But we
Ha-
didn't have perfume because we couldn't afford that. That's a luxury thing. And so it's just so weird that I'm like some poor girl, nobody, who just landed in this luxury world. My mom, and it's funny because my mom has these expressions like coming from the South, right? My mom grew up in the South, and she was like, Layla, you've got caviar tastes on a bologna budget. Yeah, I know. Oh, so yeah, it's this facade, but again, I kind of feel like I belong here because that's what perfume is anyway. It's this illusion, except they're giving it to you in scent form. Whereas I'm kind of hiding behind it going, nobody really knows about me. Nobody really knows I was poor. I just kind of make myself fit in because I write these puffy stories about perfume and I can talk the
Yeah.
talk.
Have you since though collected or gotten your nose under many fragrances, or are you still just operating from your own place?
Oh no, definitely got my nose on many fragrances. Like, gosh, one of my favorite things to do is to go mosey on down to any of the boutiques around here, big and small. Like there's an Aesop nearby. I just went
Mhm.
and smelled a bunch of new stuff from Aesop. There's a Frederick Mall in Melrose. I've gone there. There's a scent bar in Hollywood. There's another one in downtown.
Yep, I love both of those.
Right? Oh, so good. Have you been to the Harmonist? Have you heard of that
N-
brand?
No, is that in LA?
Yeah, they opened up on Melrose Place down the street from on Melrose Place. I just feel
Mm-hmm.
like I'm not like
It's
my
okay.
house is 1,000 square feet, okay, and here I am
Yeah.
going down to freaking Beverly Hills. I mean, anyway, it's just we're in LA, but in LA it's great because you have that culture too. You have that high society culture, the new money, the old money, and then you have the working class people like me,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Do you think about luxury when you're creating a fragrance, or
Absolutely not. No.
okay,
No, because with my company, Fume Fragrances, like everything is plucked out of some person, place, thing, time in my memory, and that's what I've created. When I create for other people, it's a little bit different, but I don't really think like I guess because I don't come from that, and
yeah,
again, I feel like an imposter if I try.
hmm,
Like I'm going to create something so luxurious. Like I don't own a cashmere sweater. Okay.
all
Like,
right. But maybe do you experiment with something and think like, ah, this smells like money, or this reminds me of that Chanel.
I don't know. I don't know what money smells like.
Yeah.
I
Who
mean,
knows?
besides the paper, you know what I mean, money
Right.
paper, but
Or dirty pennies.
yeah, I don't have those experiences. Like I've dined in nice places, you know, I've worn nice clothes, what I think are nice clothes, but I honestly I don't know what any of that is like. It's funny, I think of when I think luxury, I think leather.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I think leather is the history of Hermes. They were a
Saddlery
saddle
place. Yeah.
company.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were a saddle company and they originally made saddles for horses. And from there, their company grew and they started making leather gloves. And if anybody has ever worked with the skins of animals, which I have, believe it or not, I grew up in
Wow.
Montana. So I actually know what that smells like. And it smells awful. It smells like decay. It smells like flesh rot, or it can.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, very, very stinky. And so Hermes actually started to make fragrance for their leathers because they needed to cover the smell of the dead animal. I don't know if you knew that.
I didn't know it was Hermes. I just knew that was historically what they did,
Yes,
what
well,
somebody
that's
did.
how that fragrance house got into perfumery was to kind of like disguise or mask the smell of, you know, the bad smells of leather
Yeah.
or the tanning chemicals of leather because those were really strong too. So yeah, I know. I was like, that's how they got into making perfume. But it's kind of cool. Like I think of leather because there's a treatment for leather. Leather's very expensive. So when I think luxury, I think the smell of leather
Do
and
you
just the whole process of it too. Like it's a very laborious process to make a very fine piece of leather. And whether you put it as a bag or, you know, you have a pair of leather boots, like leather is classy. Like it's just classy, you
yeah.
know?
Do you make or have you made leather perfumes or leather accords?
Oh yes, that's one of my favorite things to do. I
All right.
love leather. I love leather.
Well, there you go. There's your luxury. No?
I guess, yes. Well, you know,
Do
now that
now.
I'm thinking about it too, now that I'm thinking about it too, as far as like, but I don't go in with the intention like I'm going to create something luxurious, so I'm going to create leather. Like I guess I don't work from it, like work backward like that. But like also the smell of iris and the smell of makeup, that was something that
Oh
we couldn't
yeah.
afford either. Like my mom had four girls, okay? Can you imagine buying makeup for four girls? That would get really expensive. But like makeup is a luxury item too, and that softness, like from iris. Originally, the orris roots were ground up and they were put in powders, like face powders, like makeup. You know, the kind that you would puff on to your face. You
Yeah.
know, in high society, the makeups you would wear, and so I kind of associate that a little bit too. Like so, going back to powdery leathers,
Hmm.
back to where our
It,
conversation
it all
started.
comes back to powdery leather.
Powdery leathers. Yeah. So I guess that it's funny. My takeaway from this conversation too is going to be like, oh yeah, I guess this does smell like luxury. Every time I wear powdery leathers.
I think you should make a fragrance for this episode.
You know what? Let's do it. We could do a little collaboration and the first 10 listeners who write
Yeah.
in and say, whatever, they get a free sample.
Oh my God, I would love that.
Dude, I'm serious. Why don't we do it?
We'll
No
do
skin
it.
off my nose. We'll just do it because. And it gives them an opportunity to learn a little bit about
Okay.
perfume. I'll give you the samples and everything just because
Okay.
it's for fun. And then people can start to learn a little bit about perfumery because they'll be like, why am I listening to this pot about
Exactly.
perfume? Like, what?
Exactly.
And then if they've gotten through the whole thing and they can tell you something that they liked about it or something that they learned,
Yes. Finally.
and then get a sample of a powdery leather.
It's a payoff. Yeah. I do aspire to do that with other things like with music, because I'm a musician and having like, here's the scent of my next song.
Whoa, that's cool. Do you have any notes in mind that would?
At this point, I'll have little ideas and I'll have little kind of briefs in my head. Not so much right now for my own songs, but definitely for friends and people I've talked to. I'm like, oh yeah, I know what I'm going to make you one day.
Yeah.
What? Let's talk about okay. As far as the oversensitivity, we'll do that and dyslexia. The question I ask my guests is, what are the benefits, if any?
Yeah, this hypersensitivity I have. What are
Yeah.
the benefits? That's what I love about your podcast is you go, here's something I'm struggling with, but I can positively reframe this. And I love the optimism at the end of your show. And it gives me a chance to think about this experience I'm going through and spin it and make it positive.
Uh-huh.
I think that anything that I've ever struggled with in my life, there's a reason for that. And besides, obviously, like this making me a super sniffer and possibly being able to predict and prevent danger, it's allowed me to take my work even more seriously. And it's deepened my knowledge and my respect of the raw materials that I work with in my field,
Mm-hmm.
whether they're natural or synthetic or otherwise. I have a very, very deep respect for the materials that I work for or work with, excuse me. Because essentially what I've been going through is an autoimmune response. This, chronic inflammation in my body, as a result of COVID or perhaps misuse, or abuse, overuse of some of these, chemicals that I smell, these materials that I smell on a daily basis. What it's done, in a negative way it's isolated me, in a lot of ways, but that isolation has caused me to reflect, and it's been almost a spiritual experience. It coming from a place of humility, and this humility has brought me a profound compassion, and understanding for people with autoimmune disorders and people who suffer or have suffered from random, quick onset declines in their health. And that's a perspective I didn't have before. And I have a lot more sympathy, empathy, even, for situations like that.
Mm-hmm. Were you diagnosed with an autoimmune disorder or something? Like, has the doctor said anything to affirm that?
Um, what I was told is it's an autoimmune response, and because it was more of a asthmatic. I went in for various breathing tests too. I went to a pulmonary specialist, an ENT. There was nothing conclusive in my blood work. There was nothing conclusive in the breathing tests that I've done. And I did multiple breathing tests. I was like stuck in a chamber, you know.
Wow.
Like I said, went to a pulmonologist and they couldn't find anything. There's nothing in my lungs. There's nothing came up on the x-rays, nothing came up on the MRIs, nothing in my head. Meaning like there's no lesions, there's no anything in my sinus cavities, nothing in my brain. So it was just one of these kind of things like this is inflammation. It's got to be an autoimmune response, this anaphylactic type response you're having, this inability, asthmatic response, inability to breathe, you know, that all of these things, it was kind of inexplicable to them.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was thinking about you in the last couple of days, like riding on public transit, and a couple times, like I'd sit down and be like, "Wow, Layla wouldn't survive like a minute in here."
Oh yeah, right. I mean, I could, but it would just be like,
Yeah.
but maybe it's because I work with my nose all day,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like a tool that's really, really sharp. I'm also a cook, right? I mentioned that.
Yeah.
It's like having a super sharp knife,
Yeah.
and the more you use it, the sharper the tool gets. So that's what the nose is like. And if you're constantly using it like me and you're able to like suss out all these little things because you have to, because it's your job,
Right.
you know, yeah, you're going to be acutely aware of what's going on around you.
Has it has it changed the way you make perfume? Like what you work
Yes.
with?
Yeah, it really has. It's shifted the way I do things. There's this common misperception that naturals are safer than synthetics, which is what can surprise a lot of people. But I'm just as sensitive to the natural smells as I am to the synthetic ones, and especially when I'm having a flare up. Like I opened up sandalwood oil, and sandalwood oil is really subtle. It's not overwhelming by any means. And I smelled sandalwood oil, and it was too much. I started to get one of those coughing fits, that chest tightness, that sensitivity. I had an immediate headache, migraine, type response to it. My eyes hurt, all that stuff. And I'm just like, it's really interesting how both naturals and synthetics can do that to me. It's shifted a lot of how I work, and I started diluting everything. So if I smell something or I analyze something for the first time, it's an extra step, but I'll go through and I'll dilute it.
Yeah. Has it ever gotten so bad that you can't work with a material?
Yes, I've had to take breaks from my studio. I started outfitting my lab with more air purifiers. I started wearing a mask because, again, it's not just perfume smells, it's everyday smells. If something could be too strong in the air outside, it would just be too much.
Hmm.
We're just talking like everyday smells, car exhaust, walking into the grocery store. I don't eat out at a lot of restaurants anymore because of or go to bars because of the cleaners that they use to clean their restaurant or to clean their bar. Smells just too much like alpha terpineol and whatever limonene, whatever they're using for their lemon and pine cleaners. It's just horrible. Too much, way too much.
What about dyslexia? Any benefits?
I think, and from what I've read too, it is a sign of intelligence, but there's so much about the human brain that we don't yet know. I don't know how that intelligence manifests. Yeah. So I wonder if there is this hidden treasure to kind of having that disability.
I don't know.
I wonder if there's an equal trade-off. I like to believe that there is. I'm very much like a upshot kind of a person, like, all right, so I got this thing, but here's the upshot. Like, like my sisters are incredibly smart. They all been performed academically very well. I would consider every single one of them very intellectual types, but I can do stuff in the fine art realm, that they don't know how to do or can't think of or don't have that brain connection. You know what I mean? And I do. So I think that's kind of what makes me just as like it's equal. There's an equality to that. It may not be like this perfect academic thing, but yeah, I got something else. It's just a bit different.
I wish we all could say that as human beings, or just trust our kind of unique talent, whatever that is.
Yeah, I think every single one of us has something to offer this world. It's where you choose to focus your energy. Rather than focusing all the things I can't change about myself or that I don't like about myself, I actively try to suss out all the things that I love about what I can do and what I do. I mean, you just got to dig on what you got, right?
Totally.
Well, you think about it, we only have one body. This is the only one we're going to get in this lifetime. And rather than be negative about myself and whatever I can or cannot do, yeah, just try and find the things that I'm good at, find the things that interest me, and kind of go where that love is.
Do you find as an artist it's challenging coming against, society's expectations of what you should be or your perception of things that are different than others?
Again, I try and focus on the similarities and not the differences. Not to say that differences have a negative connotation, because they certainly don't. As an artist, if I'm looking to please everybody else, I've missed my mark.
Right.
And I think about the world of pleasing everybody else as very much a popularity contest. I was not a popular person in school. I was not the popular kid. And I got much further in my life going, fuck it. I'm going to do what I want. I'm going to do what I think is cool. And I feel like people who resonated with that really showed up for it and were able to go, man, we have a common interest. Like, I dig this. Like, this is authentic about you, and that's where I create from, is that kind of creation from authenticity. I'm not here to like show you something I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I guess that goes with perfume too. Like, hey, I can put on the mask. I can say, yeah, I'm Miss Layla, the perfume professional. I know what I'm doing. And oh, you want luxury? And oh yes, I can create this, and spin up this smoke and mirrors. If you want it, I can do it.
Hmm.
But that's where the custom work really comes in. But if you look at my work, if you look at my art, because that's what I consider my perfume to be, is just one other medium I work in, right? Like I'm a painter. I do pastels. I do so much with graphite and woodworking and all this other stuff. I have a very interdisciplinary approach to art, like I have a very, very long background in culinary arts and on and on and on. But this is just one more medium where I can translate plucking something from my brain and out of the ether and just putting it out there into the world. And I'm not too concerned if somebody likes it, like, or not, you know what I mean? Or if somebody's going to shit talk, there are plenty of people who have given me negative reviews about perfumes and stuff. And it's just like, all right, like I don't let that stuff get me down.
Yeah.
This is a really cutthroat industry. And I have people who just, perfumer friends of mine, they'll read reviews of their work and they're just devastated. Oh my God, how can anybody say that? And I've spent years working on this. And I'm just like, dude, they're not for you, man. Like, don't worry about what they're saying. There's always going to be haters. There's always going to be somebody to try and like pee in your Cheerios.
Yeah.
I don't subscribe to that channel. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's good.
So at least I try not to. I mean, I'm sure I have bad days, but I don't really think about it too much when it comes to perfume. And I could care less if I get a negative review. It's like, okay, so it wasn't for that person. Even if they have this giant write-up, and believe me, there have been giant write-ups, and I've been blasted by trolls on the internet, absolutely blasted. Oh my God, I can't believe she could make this perfume. It's the same name as this by this company. You know, it's like,
Mhm.
oh God.
Damn.
I just got another rejection letter. I do contests, perfumery contests all the
Mhm.
time.
Was
Anytime they
it?
come up and somebody's like, "Oh, do it!" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm gonna do it." And this one was for the British Society of Perfumers, and for their 60th anniversary, they chose my favorite perfumery material, which is patchouli.
Ah.
They were celebrating that raw material for their 60th anniversary. You follow the terms of the contest, and they go, "Come up with a patchouli fragrance." So I came up with one that was like, this has never been done before. This is going to knock them out. This is awesome. You had to like have a CV and apply even just to get in, and they only accepted 200 applicants. So I got in. That was
Mhm.
cool enough for me, man. That was cool. I was like, yeah, I got in. Like that was good. Like
Yeah.
that was like the highlight. But anyway, I just got the rejection letter. It was like, sorry, your perfume wasn't chosen as a finalist or whatever.
Right.
This stuff happens all the time. And like perfumers, they they bid jobs like in the professional world too. They bid jobs just by submitting a fragrant entry. And most of the time you're not selected. But it's just so cool to participate. And that's how I kind of think about my life. Like I'm just here to show up for the party. You know what I mean? Like I'm not here to be the best fucking dancer or the coolest one at the party, right? Like if I'm doing it for that reason, I'm not doing it for the right reasons. So I try and like take that mindset and live the rest of my life that way. I don't know. One of my favorite artists, a very famous one, is Vincent van Gogh. And he didn't
Mhm.
get famous until he died.
Right.
And I catch myself saying this from time to time. And I go, I'm just gonna be like Van Gogh. I'll be famous when I'm dead. People will only know my work when I'm dead.
Right.
Who knows? Doing what we're doing right now, it's these little breadcrumbs that kind of lead people to where you are right now. You never know how something's going to hit or what's going to, what breadcrumb is going to bring somebody to your music or to your writing.
Yeah.
I came back to LA when I was 17, and
Mhm.
I was so determined to be famous. I was like, LA, it's a place where people get famous. And they're everywhere. Like there's celebrities everywhere around here. Like the first day I got here when I was 9, I met a celebrity. I was so excited. I went to Bob's Big Boy and I met Jay Leno, the celebrity. I didn't even know who he was. And I sat in Jay Leno's Duesenberg and, it was just like, oh, talk to Jay Leno, not even knowing it. I was just like, a cool car. But like, there's people everywhere here, and people think like, oh, I can just make it. I can make it. I can make it. And I was so starry-eyed. I was like, I didn't know what I was going to do. I wanted to be a famous musician or an, I don't even want to say the word. Should I say the word?
Yeah.
Actress. Where's the soap? Get my mouth, wash my mouth out. At one time I was like, maybe I'll do that. And then when I worked at the frame shop in Studio City, there was this one day, two women I saw absolutely accosted by paparazzi. One of them was Carmen Electra, right? And the other one was Hilary Duff.
Wow.
And Hilary Duff I knew because my younger sister watched Hilary Duff on, I don't know, I think it was a Disney Channel. It was one of those channels because my sister's 11 years younger than me.
Mm-hmm.
And Hilary Duff, she was being accosted by paparazzi. She came into the frame shop. And I just have this memory. I was just like, she was terrified, shaking head to toe. Oh my God. You know, I was just like, here, sit down. I locked the door. Didn't give a crap, right? It's a mom and pop owned business. I locked the door. Paparazzi couldn't get in. She was hiding out. She was so scared. And, you know, I was like, did the whole thing. Like, can I get you a glass of water or something like that? Whatever. And she's just like, no, I just need to, you know, I was like, come in the back room. So I took her all the way to the back. Right. And I was like, sorry, it's a wood shop. It's a mess in here. She didn't care. Right. Sat down and she just kind of did her thing for a little while. And I said, do you want to go out the back door? Like, it's just an alleyway. Nobody will know, you know, about this entrance. Like, there's no way that they could get you back here, kind of a thing. Anyways, this whole, like, whatever, story. She left. But it was like, from that day on, I was like, I never want to be famous. Like, I don't want to be that level of famous where people can, you know, chase you down like that. And again, this was in the early 2000s. So like, shit's changed. Shit's changed a lot since then. There's like laws against paparazzi being places and, you know.
Yeah. So what's in the future for you? Near or far?
Oh, I hope to move. I hope to move from Los Angeles. I've been dreaming of being in nature once again, perhaps creating in a different way, olfactively.
Where would you move?
That's the big debate. That's the big debate. So my partner's on board. We both want to move. I want to be around family. My sisters all have kids. I'm the only one who doesn't have kids, but I love kids and want to be near my nieces and nephews. So that's really important to me because they're growing up. They're my future. You know, I love participating in their life and sharing their life with them. You know, I kind of live for those moments, you know, so that's really important to me. And the older I get, the more time I want to spend with them. Yeah. Being with my nieces and nephews while they're still young. It's like, I don't want to miss it. You know, that's all that stuff you don't get back.
Do you have any new fragrances you're working on other than the Friends with Deficits one?
Oh, always. Always. Yes. I'm hoping to. I have something I'm going to launch. I'm hoping in just a week or two.
Cool.
And then something else I plan to launch this year. I work on custom stuff a lot. I also do formulating for indie beauty brands and various companies. Could be apparel or fragrance or candles or home goods or whatever. So everybody's always got a dream to interpret olfactively. And I love to do that. I love creating from that space. So those are the things that are new and cool. Well, I hope you have enough content to make something cohesive and obviously entertaining for your listeners. That would make me very happy if they were like really genuinely interested in the things that I had to say. And, you know,
I'm sure they will be. And it's been really fun talking with you.
Oh, really cool. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
You too.
All right. Once again, I'd like to thank my guest, Layla Rushing, Miss Layla with Fume Fragrances. Check out fumefragrances.com, F-U-M fragrances.com to find out about Layla's great perfume offerings and a little bit about her that you didn't hear today, maybe. And check out patreon.com/friendswithdeficits if you want to be entered into the drawing for a free sample of the Friends with Deficits perfume, which I'm really jazzed about. Or for a $10 donation, we'll just give you one. and that drawing will also be for all current Patreon members. Tell your friends about Friends with Deficits. In fact, just tell one person about it if you like the show, and hopefully that person is a perfumer and they've got something that they want to talk about besides perfume. Send them my way. And if anybody else has an interesting story, you can reach us on socials, Instagram, Facebook, at our website, friendswithdeficitspodcast.com. I know it's a mouthful. And you can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts for free. Once again, I am Adam Sultan. I gotta say this one. Smell you later.